Hi, everyone. This is Joe Massaro with Yahweh Sisterhood Book Club and Joe Massaro Ministries. And I'm so excited today because this is one of the things I love to do is interview authors and friends. And I forgot to ask how you pronounce your last name. Is it Rita Gerlach?
Gerlach.
Gerlach. Okay, it's just the way it's spelled. Okay.
Gerlach. I know. It's been pronounced a lot of different ways, believe me. Like garlic. No, it's Gerlach.
Okay, all right, great. And this is not your first time with us.
No, it's not.
It's not. And so if you can see this is Homefront Heroines, which was just a wonderful book. And there was 4 authors have contributed to it. And Johnny Alexander, who has been with us 4 times, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. Amanda Barrett, Laura Lee Bliss, and Rita Gerlach.
Mm-hmm.
Gerlach, I'm getting it. I'll get there.
You got it.
I got it. Okay. But today we are going to be talking about this book, and you can see it behind me as well, or next to me, Mercy's Refuge. And what an incredible, incredible book. But first, let's say hello and welcome, Rita. We're so excited to have you with us.
Thank you, Joe. I'm excited to be here. I really appreciate this.
Oh my gosh. I have to tell you, I think I was telling you that I am a lover of history. And yes. I always have been from the time I was in, I think, junior high school. And this book is so amazing. If you are a history lover, and even if you're not, I'm going to tell you that there's so much in this book. But why don't you share a little bit about how this book came about?
Okay, sure. Well, back in 2013, I was going through a medical crisis, and it just goes to show you what God will do when you're in the midst of a trouble. I got a phone call from my then agent, who was also Gilbert Morris's agent, and said that Gilbert wanted to collaborate with another author for a series of 3 books about the first comers to America. So Gilbert read my book, The Rebel's Pledge, and he was like, I'm picking Rita, which I was amazed. I was like, what? Really, me? Anyway, so him and we started talking. I wrote a proposal, and the proposal didn't get picked up. And so he called me one day, and we were discussing. I was telling him how I was, even just putting that proposal together, that I was fascinated by that whole era of when people were beginning to come to America, and a lot of people have heard about Jamestown, right? So that was one of the things that was in the proposal. So he was going through a tough time himself. His wife had just passed away. He was up in age. I think by that time he was over 80. And so he told me, he said, I'll tell you what, I want you to come up with your own idea, and I want you to write the book of your heart. And if you want to send me a few chapters, I'll start critiquing it for you. So it's like, okay, so I did. And he did get to go through, the first 3 chapters, and then he passed on. Yeah, he was a real Southern gentleman. Wow. He was wonderful. So he mentored me and he encouraged me on that, but he never got to see the final book. So that's what started it, and I was continuing to write in it, and I read William Bradford's book of Plymouth Plantation. And if you're a parent, and then if you're doing homeschooling or whatever you're doing, I highly recommend that you get of Plymouth Plantation in the modern English version for your kids, because there's so much revisionist history. And I was blown away when I read of Plymouth Plantation. It was written in 1643 by William Bradford, who was He came on the Mayflower. He was a separatist. He became one of their leaders in the colony, you know, in the Plymouth Plantation. And he gave such a thorough account of amazing things that happened to them. And I didn't know about this. I didn't know about that. You know, I mean, kids hear the Pilgrim story, you know, at Thanksgiving, you know, they had a feast, blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. But everything that led up to that, they don't know. So it was my intention to take a lot of the situations that he wrote about and dramatize them in Mercy's Refuge. Also, I have, you know, real people like William Bradford, his wife Dorothy, mm-hmm. Mary Brewster, William Brewster. A lot of the Separatists are also included in the story. And of course, they're dramatized in the story. But it was really great because I felt like I was getting to know those people. They were real, living human beings at the time that went through a horrendous time. It was in England they were persecuted. And a lot of people don't realize that there were two groups actually there were three on the Mayflower. There were the Pilgrims, who were mostly English people, who were Church of England. Then there were the Separatists, and that's people like William Bradford, Dorothy Bradford, Mary Brewster, William Brewster. They were Separatists. And then there was the crew. So there were three groups of people. They weren't all called Pilgrims. Well, they were Pilgrims in the sense of they were doing a pilgrimage, mm-hmm. but there was three groups. So I focused on the Separatists, and I wrote about their time in Holland. They were there for 12 years, and they did okay. They did good there. They were accepted, but they didn't want their children to grow up to be Dutch.
Right. They didn't want that influence in their lives, right?
Right. It was a very liberal society. Mm-hmm. Although if I was there, I would have liked to have met some of the Dutch masters.
Yes.
Like Vermeer and Rembrandt. Anyway, so that's why they decided to leave, and they left on two ships.
Yeah,
a lot
so
of people didn't know that.
The backdrop of the story really is where they were living, their religion, the time yes. period, with the king and in England. And so they basically went to Holland, and then that's how they decide to get on the ships. And there are two ships, so why don't you tell us about that?
Yes. Well, when they left Holland, they were on a ship called the Speedwell, and they sailed over to England, and they met up with the Mayflower. So they left on the two ships. They're out a ways, and the Speedwell began to leak. They turned back, went into Plymouth, and she was refitted and supposedly fixed. They left again. This time they got further out, and they were almost halfway. They were like over 300 miles out. And then she started leaking again, and it was really bad. And the captain said, that's it. She is not seaworthy. They had to turn around. This delayed them so much because they actually left England in August, and they didn't get to Plymouth Harbor until November. So they left, they went back. Some of the Separatists decided that in Pilgrims, they decided that some would stay, some continued, and that was on the Mayflower. So it was like, I think, if I have my facts correct here in my mind, 102 passengers and crew. So they were pretty tight in there. And they were all, all the men, the women, the children were all in that main deck, the lower deck. They were all there. They had no privacy. It was I didn't know how they survived it, to tell you honestly.
Yeah,
I really didn't.
your detail to everything. I mean, I really felt when they were on the ship that I was experiencing, like you could almost feel like what they might have been going through, and you can't because it was horrendous, like you're
It
saying what they went
was.
through. Yeah, and the
It,
food, the lack of food, the health issues, it was just terrible.
everything. I mean, and you know, two women were pregnant. It was horrible.
Yeah.
But even in the midst of that, their faith is what kept them strong. They relied on God, and they believed that whatever his will was, they accepted that. But they believed so firmly that they were supposed to leave and go to America. I had a person say to me, well, they went to America because the English wanted to genocide the American Indians. And I asked him where he heard that. And he said, well, that's what I was taught in school.
Mm.
And I said, well, that wasn't true. You were lied to. It was so far from that. As a matter of fact, there was a day when the men were on shore and they began building the settlement. And one of the American Indians, he walked in and he said to them, have you had any beer? Yeah, have you any beer? And I guess he knew that, the foreigners or whatever the Indians would call them, that they did, because on the Mayflower, the water was so bad in Europe that they didn't bring barrels of fresh water. They brought barrels of beer. Mm. And everyone was allotted some beer every day. Wow. Even the children.
Oh my God.
I was like, well,
I didn't know that.
Maybe it's not right for me as a Christian to say this, but I was like, well, I'm reading this in Bradford's, thing. And I thought, maybe they really needed that, I mean, didn't Paul say, drink a little wine for your often infirmities?
If I was on that ship, I probably would have needed some every day.
Give me a glass of beer, please. Yeah. So, yeah, quite an adventure for them. So by the time,
oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. By the time, they got there, and, I don't want to make this book sound like it's a sad book.
Oh, no, not at all.
Because, it really isn't. It does show, I try to show the things that they went through, the hardships. And I mean, that's life. Who wants to read really a story that's all sugar and spice and everything nice all the time? Some people might, but that's not what Mercy's Refuge is. It's about the life of these people. And it really does, it gave me a newfound appreciation and respect for them. And especially the women. Wow.
Absolutely.
What the women followed their husbands through this. Some of them brought their children, and the first winter was really bad, but that I don't go into that part. I just go up to, well, I'm not going to say where I go up to.
Don't say that.
That's a spoiler.
I actually, the words that came into my mind as I was reading was, what courageous people these people.
Yes. They were very brave.
Yes, they really were. And their faith, as you were saying, was so strong.
Yeah.
What courage it took to actually leave a place like that in the time and go off on a ship, and you had no idea what you were going to go into. I mean, that to me is absolutely heroic. And I was just, it was incredible to read it. So this is not a sad story. Yes, there's things that happen, but this is part of what our heritage is. I think I read somewhere that, I'm doing my genealogy, I'm trying to set it aside a little bit, but I think this encourages you to really find out more about your own heritage and your own genealogy, and to look into that, because I think you'd be really surprised. I know that I'm getting more and more surprised as I go deeper into it. And so I encourage you to do that as well. But
Absolutely.
so one of the things that I love about this book too is you list all kinds of things in the back as well.
Yeah.
Which I'm always looking for when I read a book. And you list the accounts from William Bradford's of Plymouth Plantation that you were talking about, and that's what
Yes.
you wrote into the story. And then you put extras in there, which I really love. Like you'll see what a ship biscuit was, the pottage, apple custard pie, tip caps, the English Huff's wife. Now, is that what you had on your website? Huff's wife. Yeah. Okay. Is that what you have a picture? You had that on your website?
I don't know. No, I don't have anything about that on my website, but that is the correct spelling that they used.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you go into the Separatists and just all kinds of information in there. I just love it. And others aboard the Mayflower. So you actually have, as you were saying, real people who lived in this story.
Yeah.
And you have taken it into such an incredible place. I just love it. And so William Bradford gave us so much information.
He sure did.
Now, let me ask you a question. I wasn't sure about this. Did all of them bind themselves for 7 years to merchants? Or was it, did I just read that somewhere, or I'm not sure?
Well, they weren't individually bound, like, they weren't like indentured.
Okay.
Usually people that were bound like that from like England that came over, they would be an indentured slave or servant. And that was, for a number of years. What they did is that the financiers of their voyage, it was an agreement that they would pay back the initial amount of money that it took to get these ships, fit them out, get a crew, pay them, pay the crew and everything to take them over. So it's like they were paying for their tickets.
Okay.
So the agreement is that they were going to pay it back through once they got their settlement built, that they were going to pay back the financiers through the sale of crops and other things, which didn't happen, and they weren't able to do it. So, one of the interesting things about that is that the agreement was that they were going to build a settlement in Virginia. And of course, when we think of Virginia, we think of the Virginia we have now.
Yeah.
Right? But at that time, Virginia went through where we have New York now, was part of Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
So they were going to go into the Hudson River and go into the Hudson and find a settlement. But because it was November and it was winter, and they get across, they're blown about by all these horrific storms. They get over into Massachusetts, and there were these shoals in the water. They couldn't go any further. If they had, the captain told them, he was called the master, the captains were called masters. And he said, if we even make the attempt to go south and get to the Hudson, the bottom of this boat is going to be torn out and we will all perish. So they decided, okay, we got to stay put. So that's why they ended up where they ended up.
Mm-hmm. So you didn't write this book without doing a lot of research.
Yeah, I did a lot of research. I wanted to get it right. I really wanted to get it right. And it's not perfect. I'm sure it's not perfect.
Well,
I might get somebody that says, well, but I did my best and I thought of it this way. These people that I'm writing about, I want to honor them with doing the best that I can do to honor their memory,
and you really did that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Has
I
there
appreciate
been
that.
like any aha moments or, oh my gosh, in researching, or have you met anybody who said, oh, that's in my genealogy, that person, or anything like that?
Yeah, I have a Facebook page that I started. I started it maybe 6 months before I published, the book was published. And it was specifically for Mercy's Refuge and the Mayflower 400th anniversary. And I invited people and people joined. And yeah, there was several people that got on and said, oh, I did my genealogy. I'm a direct descendant of John Holland, or
Wow.
I'm a direct descendant of the Bradfords,
Wow.
And of course, in 2021, the people that survived and continued living in Massachusetts, their descendants are in the thousands and millions.
Yeah.
A lot of descendants from them. So yeah, I did. I met a lot of them, and I did have some aha moments. But I had some that were like, when I'm reading Bradford's book, where I just was like, oh my God, dear Lord, if God had his hand, and it actually brings tears to my eyes when I think about it, what they went through. There was a moment that I did not know about where they were crossing and they were in a storm and the main beam on the ship cracked.
Mm-hmm.
And the men did what they could to hold it up, because if it had further cracked, that's what they feared, the ship would have just broken apart and they would have all died in the middle of the ocean in a storm. And his description of it was incredible. But one of the men, a carpenter, had the idea that he was going to bring with him on the ship what they called a great screw that was used to shore up ceilings and roofs of houses. So they went and they got that out of the hold of the ship. They brought it in. What they did is they put a piece of board that broke, just underneath of it. They put this board. It snapped. It wasn't going to work. But then they put the great screw underneath of it, put a board on top of that, and began cranking it up. And it pushed that beam right back into place. And they made it across. And it's amazing. When the Mayflower went back to England, years later, it was auctioned. And the man that bought the ship bought it for its timber. It's timber.
Mm-hmm.
If you go over into England, there is a barn. It's called the Mayflower Barn. And you can see that cracked beam.
Wow.
Yes. I found a picture of it. And as I was writing the book, I was sharing these things with the people on that page. And I put the picture up about that, it's actually still there. You can see it. And it's this crack going right across, this jagged crack across this big, thick ship's beam, and
I want to
the
find
man,
that picture.
yeah, I should send it to you because,
Yes.
and that the man that bought all the timber from the Mayflower, he put it into that barn, and it's like, wow, and it really makes me sad when I saw that twice it happened this year or this past year, where people threw paint over Plymouth Rock. This is Plymouth 1620, and it's in a secure thing, and these vandals went in and just threw paint all over it.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. But, I'm like, okay, they obviously do not know the story of these people.
Right. Yeah.
If they knew the story of the Separatists, they would maybe have thought differently.
Yeah.
And this is why it's so important. The history has got to be taught to our kids. It's
Yeah.
got to be passed on.
I so agree.
You
And not
know?
polluted history or not somebody else's history, but our history. And
Yeah.
that's another topic we could get on.
Right. We could.
Yeah. So I don't want to forget this, that there was a certain amount of years when your book came out that the Mayflower actually arrived in this country. And it was a 400-year celebration. Is that what it was last year?
Yes. In 2020, November, it was the 400th anniversary of the sailing of the Mayflower when they made it to Plymouth.
It's just amazing.
Yeah, and they had big celebrations up there and everything. And I hope that maybe this summer, who knows, my husband and I have thought about driving up. I'd love to see Mayflower too, because they have a replica of the Mayflower, and I would love to go see that. I'd like to see the settlement that they have, and I'd also like to go to the cemetery, where William Bradford is buried, and some of the other leaders. A lot of the people that died the first year or two, they don't know where they're buried, because they were concerned that some of the Indians might think that they were either plagued or that they were dying off and that they would be easily overtaken, So, yeah. So, like Dorothy Bradford. I think it's...
So I have one last question on the book is there going to be a sequel?
No, I hadn't planned on it.
Okay.
But you know what? You never know. Sometimes, I might get that in my head and say, I need to continue this into the next part of the story, so.
Well, my vote is yes, continue it, because I so love the first book.
Thanks.
I
will consider it. I really will.
So I always like to ask this question to authors, what, and I always normally get the same answer or I get some more, but what would you say to somebody who is like, oh, I really would like to write something, they're nervous about starting. And I always hear, that you just have to write. But is there anything else that you might want to add to that for somebody?
Well, I had this experience pretty recently where someone called me on the phone and, where they emailed me and said, I need to talk to you. And so we had this discussion and he said, I want to write. I said, okay. I didn't say, well, then write,
Yeah.
I mean, so we discussed it and I asked him, why do you want to go into this? And do you have an idea for a book? And, what kind of book, what is the genre? And, just had a nice chat about what is realistic when it comes to writing. Some people have got the idea that, oh, if I write a book and it gets published, I'm going to be on the New York Times list.
Yeah.
I'm going to become a millionaire.
Yeah, it doesn't happen.
Right? And they're going to make a movie of it. I mean, realistically, first of all, that's not the reason why people should write. The reason why you should write has many aspects to it, but I think the first and foremost one is because you love to do it and because you want to do something in this day and time that we're living in, to inspire and encourage others. I did a workshop for about 5 years here in Maryland, up in the mountains. It was wonderful. We had 30 authors and writers, and it was called Writing to Inspire. And that's what the main deal was with the workshop, is that I don't want to write for fame and fortune. If I write a book, I want it to be good enough to where it inspires somebody, you know, to whatever their calling is and whatever they need in their lives. You know, even with me reading William Bradford's of Plymouth Plantation, it so inspired me to not just write about it, but to strive to live a good life in faith with my God, and to do what I could to honor him and to be courageous with whatever is coming our way. You know, I mean, we've seen this last year. 2020 was really tough. And, you know, on my side here, there were some pretty awful things that happened to people that I knew.
I think we can probably all say that.
I think we can all say it.
Yeah.
But then there was good too.
Yeah.
And to be able to put a book out like this and just, you know, I've given copies away and I'm like, you know, I just want it, if it gives a person a moment of reprieve from the darkness and the discouragement and everything that's going on, just kind of take you away into another world for a little while.
Yeah.
And help people to be thankful for the life that they do have. You know,
I so agree.
There is a, you know, I really see a strong delineation between people that are secular writers that want to write a secular book, and then the believing writer who wants to write. There's a difference in the heart.
Yep.
You know, so I guess if somebody was just to ask me to put it all together, I'd probably tell them, search your heart to find out why you're being led to do this. And then just do it. And, you know, go from there, you know. And thank God we have things like the Amazon program where people can, you know, self-publish books. I know best-selling authors that are doing that.
Yeah. Yep.
You know.
Well, so, I appreciate that response, because that's probably the best response, I have to tell you, that I have heard in a very long time. It was really, I think, what, you know, many people need to hear. And I know that it's been an encouragement to me as well. Just, I have to tell you, just meeting authors and interviewing them and going to conferences when I was like, my first conference was Carol Kent's Speak Up conference. I went by myself, scared to death, but I went. And, you know, and I started to meet people who were going through the same things that I was going through, and people that were, you know, have written books, but everybody is always so wonderful when you meet them. I have to tell you that the community of authors and writers is just powerful. It really is. I can't think of any organization or group that I have been with when I meet writers and authors that it is just so supportive. It really is. And it doesn't matter what level you're at. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't. Help you. Yeah. It doesn't matter. That was one of the reasons I loved doing that workshop. We had, you know, at least 30, and that's all we could have. That's all we were allowed to have there. And the camaraderie was so awesome. You know, everybody just, you know, people made friends, and, you know, we just had this great fellowship together, you know, and wonderful speakers. You know, maybe I'll be able to do it again someday, but
that would be great. I'd like to be there.
Oh, I'd love to have you there. You're in Pennsylvania?
I'm in Indiana.
You're in Indiana. Why did I think Pennsylvania?
I was in New York most of my life until 6 years ago. So we've lived in Indiana since then.
Oh.
So close to Ohio.
Are you in Gary, Indiana?
Yeah, I'm in Fort Wayne. Fort Wayne.
I always love that from the Music Man. Gary, Indiana.
Okay, so why don't you tell us what you're working on next, or what you aspire to be doing next?
Okay. Yeah, before we go off on some tangent, right? I have a tendency
I want to get that in.
I have a tendency to do it. My dad used to call me Chatty Cathy. So, yeah. And he even bought me a Chatty Cathy doll. So,
Really, I remember those.
yeah. I was like, 8 years old, and I should have got the message, Anyway, what I'm working on right now is I'm working on a World War I novel.
Hmm.
And, I started a notebook for it some years back, and I set it aside to write Mercy's Refuge, which I set aside to write the 5 novellas for Barber.
Mm-hmm.
Then went back to Mercy's Refuge, finished that. Now I'm back to this.
Okay.
And it's been great. I've been doing a lot of research, and for about 3 months here, I was struggling with, okay, where am I going with this? I don't want to write a book about war, but I do want to write a book that's set in the era of the war, right? With, some undertones about it. And so finally, it was so great because I was really praying about this. And over the weekend, I sat down and I was working on it, and okay, there it is. And sometimes that's what happens. It comes to you, and it's going to be about 3 women who in the story, they're facing that their loved one, that 2 of them are sisters, and the husband and the fiance are both over in France. And the mother of these girls, her husband, before the Americans go into the war, was in what was called the escadrilles. They were pilots. Mm-hmm. And they were volunteers that went over there, and he perished in France. And when I was a little, it kind of was inspired about that story because my great aunt, when I was a little girl, had a photograph on the wall of her house, and it was a young man, and he was in the pilot garb. He had on the helmet that they wore, which was like this leather cap, mm-hmm. and scarf, and I was always fascinated, but nobody really told me about him, except that, well, that's your great Margaret Ann's first husband. Mm. He died in World War I. Wow. Now he was obviously a pilot. Mm-hmm. So, I thought about that, but yeah, so that's what I'm doing. I'm working on a World War I novel. And it's not really a straightforward romance. It's going to be more women's fiction. Okay. With romance in it, though. You got to put a little bit of it in there.
So if somebody wants to contact you, what's the best way to do that? And what's your website or Facebook page?
Okay. Well, they can always go to Facebook and just, type in my name. I'm in there. And, friend me. Then I have my website, which is Rita Gerlach.wordpress.com.
Okay.
Yeah, I love doing my website. It's really fun. And they can email me. I'm very open to getting emails. My email is all little letters, RPKG. Mm-hmm. at comcast.net.
Okay. And is there a separate Facebook page on Mercy's Refuge?
Yes, there's the Facebook page for Mercy's Refuge. Just type in, you can type in Mercy's Refuge, 400th anniversary of the Mayflower. Okay. Or just Mercy's Refuge. And then, of course, they can go to Amazon.
Yes.
And, under books, type in my name. And I have an author's page there, mm-hmm. that has all the books that I've written. And I think this next book, which is called Wait Until Morning, that is my 14th novel. So, they can find me there. They can find Mercy's Refuge there. They
Okay.
can get everything, and all my books are in ebook or in paperback.
All right. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to share?
Um, just that I hope that everybody does okay this year.
Amen to that.
You know, we don't know what kind of year it's going to be. You know, I didn't jump up and down and go, yay, 2020 is over, 2021 is here, yay.
Yeah. I don't think
I was
anybody
glad,
really did, but
I mean, I was glad 2020 was over.
yes, I think all of us were.
It's just love each other and do what we can to help people. Reach out to our elderly. Oh my goodness, you know, I've thought these days about my parents. They were in nursing homes, and if I could not have seen my dad or my mother for months on end, I would have, it just would have drove me crazy. It would have upset them. So if you have elderly people that you know, reach out to them, and you know.
And some people passed away without even having family members around them this past year. So it was just a terrible, terrible year.
It's so heartbreaking.
Can I just say this though? In the midst of all of this,
yes,
God is still God.
He is.
And nothing can change that, no matter what.
Nothing can change it. Nothing can change His word.
Right.
He loves us.
His
son is coming again. I mean, I look at all these things going on and I'm like, somebody asked me in an interview one time, they said, if there was one sentence that you could say to Jesus, what would it be? And I've held to this answer ever since. I would say to him, hurry up.
That's a good answer. Hurry up, I like that.
So, you know, we have him to look to and keep our eyes on him and continue on. But we all need to be supporting each other these days.
Well, I just want to say it has been such a pleasure to be with you today. I really have enjoyed it.
My pleasure.
Again, I just want to say I love this book, and it's definitely worth getting. I actually have and I love the bookmarker, by the way.
Thank you. I made that.
I wondered if you could, and I'm like, I got to ask her about that because I want to make some of those. Let me just show you if you can see it. How absolutely pretty it is, and it's nice and long, which I like as well. Yeah. So it's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, hey, if anybody wants one, if anybody gets any book of mine and they want a bookmark like that, all they got to do is contact me. I will mail them a bookmark. I'll mail them a label to put inside their book, so it's signed.
Yep.
And maybe a few other fun things.
All right, look at that. That's a first. I love that. All right. Thank you again, Rita, for being with us. And anytime you want to come back, please, you are so welcome to.
Well, thank you. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.